Alright, so taking this upper ball joint loose, what you need to do to get this shock out, I just used a 6mm Allen key, inserted it in, and you may notice I'm on the wrong side. I'm actually reassembling it right now, tightening it. But this nut is a 24mm, so when you're loosening it, you'll have this Allen key basically propped against the other side. But right now we're tightening it, so that's why it's here, so we can actually start to tighten this nut without this whole shaft rotating. Alright, so here you can see how the lift spacer goes on. You basically set it down on top of the factory top hat, start the nuts that held the factory shock in, then you feed the new bolt with a washer through it. Now, as we tighten these down with just a regular 13mm box wrench, they will put pressure on the new bolts, which will hold it in place to go back up into the factory mount. You want to pick up some washers because the kit does not come with washers for the top. It just comes with these small little nuts here, and just the size of those holes. Definitely seems better to put some washers on. When you're lining this back up in here, just be aware that you have to kind of finagle it a little bit. It's totally loose from the lower control arm. So you can see we disconnected the upper ball joint. Simplest way to do it. Loosened up these bolts, these nuts here, and this one down here. That way it removed all the bind in the suspension, so you can move things pretty easily. And when you line this up, just beware, like I said, you got to kind of play with it. You might have to kind of, pry on a little bit here to get it to pop in, but it doesn't take too much effort. So now, shock is bolted in, the lower bolt is in. Got to finagle the lower control. You got to kind of push on the spindle a little bit, kind of wiggle the shock a little bit to get it lined up. I used a little center punch or a screwdriver or something to kind of help, kind of line it up and everything. So now we got to reconnect the upper ball joint, which is fairly simple if you have a spare floor jack. Just jack up on the lower control arm. I'm on the lower ball joint here, lifting on it. And you just got to kind of play with this and kind of wiggle it. You may have to kind of pry on a little bit, maybe tap with a hammer. But we're just going to jack this up till that pops back in. Then we'll put the nut back on the bottom, and that'll be done. Alright, so getting ready to do the rear lift cup, which is this little guy right here. So you need to loosen up this bolt, that bolt. Those are 18mm. I had to use a breaker bar with a short socket to get on that one. I used my impact gun on this one, but you could use a lot of stuff there. And then I had to take the caliper off because there wasn't enough slack in the brake line. That's two 10mm bolts, and there's a little clip on the front brake pad holder, and then it just rotates forward, pulls off there. And there's a bolt on the back of this trailing arm you need to loosen up, and a bolt on the back here. This one's a 15mm up top, and this one's an 18mm, and you'll need to hold this nut so you can actually loosen this. This one, you can't see it behind the caliper, but it's got one of those little captive ears on it that holds it from rotating. So that one, this one back here, this one on the bottom. You're going to have to take the bolt out here for the shock, and you're actually going to replace the shock. Everybody uses like 1997 to 2002 F-150 four-wheel drive shocks because they're essentially identical, but they're longer. So now we did this on both sides. The axle has a ton of droop, so we're going to try to pull this spring out, shove that in there, and then try to put it together. Alright, so we got the first lift cup in. We had to resort to using some coil spring compressors to compress the spring enough. And even with as much as I compressed it, which is kind of hard to see here, but compressed it several inches, my buddy still had to basically stand on the rotor to push it down so I could squeeze it up in there. These coil spring compressors are really janky, so go get some good ones. Don't use these. But yeah, compressed the spring and then slid it in place with that lift block in there. So now we gotta loosen those up, and then I gotta install my longer shocks because these are not gonna cut it. So yeah, we're almost done.